Good afternoon. My name is Raymond Smith from East Carolina University, located in Greenville, North Carolina, in the United States of America. The title of my talk is Coastal Community Adaptation, Planning for Sea Level Rise. In the eastern portion of our state, we have a number of rural coastal communities that are vulnerable to sea level rise and struggle to develop strategic plans. Some of their challenges include time horizon and uncertainty, conflicting stakeholder objectives, limited resources and capacity, prioritization of urban areas, equity and social vulnerability, social conflict, and complexity. Looking at the figure to the right-hand side, you'll see an illustration of both sea level rise vulnerability. Along our state's coastline, we have the Outer Banks, which is the thin land strips that you see out towards the Atlantic Ocean. And then we have an area also known as the Inner Banks, which sits along the Pamlico and the Albemarle Sound. The area that you see very much towards the center of this illustration that's highlighted in bright red, orange, and yellow is largely the two counties of Terrell and Hyde counties. They are the two of the 5 most threatened counties in the United States subject to sea level rise. Because of this region, the area is quite shallow in terms of this coastal profile. Much of Hyde County and Terrell counties stand at only above approximately 1.5 meters above sea level, making them quite vulnerable to increasing sea level rise, as illustrated by the color bar that you see there given in the legend. We're going to focus on these particular areas in terms of areas of our interest in terms of this study. Our approach is basically a three-phased approach. One, profiling some characteristics about the community and their challenges. Two, formulating some of the response strategies, identifying controllable options and establishing model scenarios. And three, measure and evaluating vulnerabilities, resiliency, and adaptive capacity. Our dynamic hypothesis is that efforts such as building dikes, water evacuation, and elevating structures to counteract the inundation may be inadequate and unaffordable to address sea level rise. It's very important that these communities consider the timely execution of an adaptation plan in order to avoid rural coastal community economic and social collapse. So in the rural coastal community, agriculture is one of the largest components to their economy, and we're going to focus on that component specifically in this example. So I want to talk about two different ways in terms of how the agricultural area is protected. The first can be through pumping water out of the fields, which is often occurs by storms such as hurricanes that we're subject to in eastern North Carolina, as well as just general precipitation. That's oftentimes done by the creation of an informal drainage district, which is oftentimes funded directly by agricultural landowners. So the more profitable that the agricultural activity is, the more plentiful funds are in order to acquire pumps and operate them, which can then be used to evacuate the fields, the water from the fields, and basically protect the field crops. Without this protection, the crops have a likelihood of actually having the crops lost, which would then diminish the agricultural revenue, reduce agricultural profit, and then make it less affordable in order to operate the drainage district. The other dimension is the concern of having saltwater inundation or intrusion into the field structures. So when an agricultural field is subject to saltwater intrusion, a farmable acreage is then turned into something that's non-farmable for many years to decades. And so this is where having something such as a protection barrier capacity being built, which is often funded by tax revenue from residential property as well as agricultural property, becomes quite a concern. So this is kind of how two different protections would play out in this case.